This is Guardian Radio 96.9 FM. Fresh news, smart talk, all day. The views and opinions of the hosts and guests are their own and do not necessarily reflect the position of the management and staff of Guardian Network.
Darling, you know I love you so. You are the pride of my heart. Darling, you mean so much to me. Why don't you let me marry you? Why don't you let me marry you, darling, and be my loving bride? You are the sweetest darling that I've ever met. And when you let me marry you, we will live happily, and we will raise a family. The girl for you, the boy for me. So would you let me marry you, darling, and be my loving bride? You are the sweetest darling that I ever met. Even when you're far away from me.
Good yawning this morning, and welcome back to Guardian Radio 96.9 FM, your station for fresh news, smart talk, all day. It is Thursday, the 14th of July, 2022, and you are on the clock with Erin, Greene. On the clock, we engage organizations, institutions, social and cultural leaders, and ordinary people to better understand the impact of public policy, private sector development, and emerging social and consumer trends. On the clock, we have conversations that help us understand and navigate a rapidly changing Bahamas. It is Thursday, that means it is a Culture Thursday, and that song we just listened to was Let Me Marry You by Charlie Adamson. Let Me Marry You by Charlie Adamson. I just like it. I am stuck on this Goombay era, just fascinated by it, by the music, by the various sounds. I'm also fascinated by where those sounds went, right? What happened to them? Did Bahamian music just evolve them out of existence? I don't understand. I'm wondering, is this the cheekiest era of Bahamian music? You know, we get songs like Lizzie Carey Basket on Her Head, and yes, songs that challenge our perceptions about what it means to be Bahamian. Because a lot of young people hear this music and wonder, well, who are these old people? These are not the old people I know. I know older Bahamians singing about things like this when Charlie Adamson tell his wife, Emily, you're eating too much for me. You know, nobody's talk like that these days. We don't talk about things, not the real things, not the important things. Well, some of these young artists, they doing it, you know, things that ail us or that ail them personally. You know, I always like to hear Stalit, Avi, Shine, all these young men opening up their hearts to us. You know, Stalit say, woman texting me hi, woman calling me pie. If my gal leave me, I ain't gonna die. She done make red run in my eye and my blood pressure sky high. She want me to, no, God want me to live. She want me to die. These guys, they're singing about some of the experiences that they're having in their personal lives. They tell us, you know, all about how these women be doing them and having them feeling. But we need more songs about the Bahamian experience. We need more songs about what it means to be Bahamian. We need more songs about trying to catch the bus. We need more songs about being on the road and ain't no bathroom to use. I tell you why that song is so important. We need them songs because right now, that a lot of Bahamian men are just animals. You know, they have no decorum, no brought-upsy, because they will stop anywhere in the road to use the bathroom. Anywhere, anytime. Right by your car door open to the road, back turn to the road, anywhere. I had an experience in a food store parking lot in any developed country, in any global north country. But he would have been arrested. He would have had a sex offender charge. He'd probably been put on the register, right, for something that is commonplace. I'm not saying it's accepted, but it must be accepted because there are laws against it. But nobody enforces those laws, right? Urinating in public. In public. Not just, but in a space where it's likely that others will see what you're doing. You see, we need songs about that. Let me tell you why. Because if we don't have songs about it, then you would just think that the average Bahamian man is a nasty man that has no concern for his community, the spaces he inhabits, the people around him. But that's not true. That cannot be true. You see, when you delve into it, what you realize is that the country does not function like a modern country. Where there should be public restrooms, there are no public restrooms. Where there should be toilet in the public restroom, there is no toilet paper in the public restroom. We're not even concerned about the tourists. And so it's almost as if in the planning meeting somebody says, well, you know, the tourists should be in the hotel anyway. We shouldn't be encouraging them to be off property by having toilet paper in the bathroom so they could maybe stop and enjoy themselves a little bit longer. Why would you do something like that? But if we had songs about it, then we would realize that the social crisis is rooted in a political crisis. And it's a real political crisis. It's not the sort of thing where we continue to prioritize tourists over Bahamians, and there are always functioning facilities for tourists, whatever it is they want to do. Good morning, taxi union. And good morning to everybody that had an amount of time waiting on a bus to get to work this morning. See, if we had songs about it, if we thought it was important enough, you know, to document in our culture, then we would have realized that in modern developed worlds, wherever there are public people, wherever there are people, there are public facilities for people. This is a crisis of great proportion. See, I'm almost certain, you could correct me if I'm wrong, I'm almost certain that we have legislation that requires businesses that serve the public to have bathrooms that are accessible to the public. But there are many businesses that do not. They don't even acknowledge that that exists. And some of these businesses are the types of businesses that like to keep you in their business for an hour minimum. And some of the excuses they give are just ridiculous. If you're going to tell me, well, listen, this constitutes a security risk having a bathroom accessible to the public in the bank, and listen, you can't put cameras in the bathroom, right? You're not allowed to do that. But you could put cameras at the vents in the ceiling to determine if anybody has breached the ceiling, to mitigate that security risk. It's so simple. But see, this is a crisis of great proportions because we are allowing essential services. Now, I wish for somebody to text me or call me and tell me, you know, Ms. Greene, you don't have to use the bank if you don't want to. If you don't like the way the people run the bank, then you don't have to use the bank, you know. I wish somebody would write me, text me, call me and tell me that so I could explain to you how our governments continue to drag us into a future that they are unprepared for, let alone the people they expect to keep propelling the country forward. I got a text here that says, Erin, why don't you talk about the women who dispose their sanitary napkins in the same garbage they throw their food for garbage men to touch that? It's a biohazard. It should be disposed in a separate container. Let's talk about that. You're absolutely right, texter. It is a biohazard. right? Especially when people do not have access to or cannot afford proper garbage bags to secure their garbage in. Or if the facilities that they rent or lease does not have proper trash or garbage storage facilities or infrastructure in place. See, this is another problem that the individual cannot solve on their own. It requires both a familiar, like a family, a community, and a statewide response to solve these problems. So let's talk about that. Let's talk about where a 12-year-old girl, a 14-year-old girl is going to find biohazard materials to dispose of their sanitary products when their parents cannot even afford to buy them sanitary products. You're absolutely right. I had suggested to numerous MPs and candidates as they were preparing to offer themselves that a great initiative to introduce yourself to your communities, to your potential voters, right? Whether it's pre-vote or after you get in or after you don't get in and you're still trying to establish a presence in that constituency or community, is to start a trash disposal initiative, community initiative, by begging businesses in the area to donate, like to maybe price match the costs of garbage bags. Do an assessment in the community of how many bins exist, the movement of garbage, and buy in bulk proper storage bags for trash, accompanied with a small home repair project where you help people make suitable storage facilities. You make landlords pay for them. But you have to include with this program a teaching aspect where you teach people how to dispose of their trash properly. You'd be surprised to know how many people don't know how to dispose of their trash properly or can't figure out why it's necessary to purchase the proper type bag for it. But that's something that we can solve at the community level. And what it trickles down to the family or the household, and it trickles up, we push it up to the state level, and once we're successful in communities, then we move it to the state level. I got a text here that says, Erin, why you always start off beating up on men? I still partly agree with you today. I worked where I recommend banks build a bathroom on the side of their building. No, I wasn't beating up on men. I was saying that typically we beat up on men about this issue, but if we delve a little deeper, we will see that with the stats on with UTI, urinary dysfunction, we call it UD, urinary dysfunction, especially among men in this town, we would see that it's a matter of public health and public safety to legislate public bathrooms. So we're not beating up on men. And see, I started with men, I centered them in the conversation because it is obvious that we don't care about women by the lack of public facilities that are out there. You hear me? So we did a good thing and centered men, and we didn't make it about beating up men. But the truth is, our lack of concern for women is what I should be gnawing on, you know? Because once women hit puberty, once the female human hits puberty, they start bleeding regularly. And we expect them to go to school, to go to work, to be a part of society, to catch the bus, to sit and wait on the roadside for whenever the bus show up because we don't have a schedule. And those constituents absolutely need the public bathroom facilities. That with the problem with stray and feral dogs that we have in the town. We already have a documented story of a woman who was attacked while she was on a menstrual cycle by wild dogs and killed. See, so I take it out of the realm of beating up on men or singling out women. We're taking it out of the realm of that, and we're focusing like on the policy issue. When we get past our biases and our preconceived notions, then we see that this is a policy issue, and it's at crisis level at this point, because we want to be the leader in tourism in the world, but we will not ensure that our tourists can use the bathroom whenever they need to. So I'm just reading this text, and I have to ask the texter to be easy with me. Yeah, this text has sent some hilarious things, but I can't read everything on the radio. But what the text is saying is, like, I'm going to pretend like they're saying this part. Like, you're right, Miss Greene. It is a problem at both the individual level and at the state level. And perhaps it's a culture of a lack of concern or disregard for other people. Because he said, listen, people are urinating in the politicians are frittering. Anyway, you know the analogy. I ain't going to put it together. Our money. Another text says, people know exactly what the garbage bin is for. They're just nasty. It's deeper than that, texter. It's deeper than that. You go out to Montague Beach. It is obvious to anybody with good sense that there are not enough bins at Montague Beach for the intended purpose, for the rate and movement and flow of people coming through Montague Beach. In fact, it doesn't matter how many bins you put out there, you're going to need to have a regular daily pickup, maybe twice a day, because of the wind and the environmental factors involved also. Now, we could talk about the individual aspect. Listen, the bins at Montague Ramp are for fishermen. They're for people who do business on the ramp. It's not really for you to bring your home garbage. You're cleaning out an apartment. You need some place to go dump all this garbage. That's not what it's for. It's for fish refuse, ramp garbage, beach garbage. But no, a part of it is that, yeah, people just disregard it. But another part of it is that we're not taking it seriously from the policy level. Good morning, Erin. Growing up, they taught us as males to urinate in public. When I was young, I hated urinating in public. Anytime I said I need to pee, countless people used to say, "Your boy, pull your ding-ding out and go pee by one tree." You're right. It's cultural. Right? It's policy at the social level and policy at the state level that we have to interrogate. And it's important to see that balance, right? Not everything is the government's fault, although the government has an awesome obligation to the public. Okay, I see I've got two callers on the line. Now, callers, I got a guest, a really important conversation. I think you're going to like it, but I think this is important as well. Good morning, caller. You're on the clock.
Good morning, Erin. How you doing?
I'm good, thank you. How are you?
I should just put you on blast this morning, but I can save it.
Would you tell them what you can put me on blast for? We talking about the 3 score and 10 gang?
You know how long I was to get with me so we could get this, but the back of my yard started up and farm, and I could have go couple tomato by now.
Look here, Miss Farmer Davis didn't call you? Y'all didn't connect?
He never called, man. Davis is sellout, man.
No, he is sellout. Just thank you for giving me. Ain't nothing I like more than wrestling up, man. You know, I like a cowgirl. I like to lasso him and bring him in.
Listen,
yeah.
I'm glad you mentioned the right quick the topic of urinating in public and cleanliness. We need to be much cleaner. And I attended the most recent Chunkanu parade.
Mm-hmm.
It was spectacular, right? But there's some stuff I observed with many garbage bins on Bay Street.
Mm-hmm.
Every 10-foot feet should be a garbage bin on Bay Street. Every store should be made to put one of them there. Because when people then finish with their beverages and stuff, they just drop it right on the ground.
Mm-hmm.
You understand? And the other observation, why don't our government officials stop treating us like little children? Because you go, the majority of adults are at Job Canoe. Why all the bars and the eateries have to be closed on a holiday or something like that if they desire to open? Like, you can't get a drink of water. You got to go walk way down by McDonald's around there to someone who's selling something they can't. Why don't the bars and the clubs and stuff are allowed? You know how much money they could make with all them people down there.
Yeah.
I'd
Absolutely.
like you to comment on it. Like, thanks for taking my call.
Yeah, man. Absolutely. Our business models sometimes are effective, in the short term, or they may seem to make sense, like, in a microcosm. But when you step back 3 or 4 paces, then you realize that this don't make any sense at all. And we have a lot of those small models here, right? Because we are in this culture of hyper-individualism. And so we don't see that. Also, people want to save money. They could provide a more effective or successful service, but they want to save money as opposed to investing money. Okay, got another 2 callers. Good morning, caller. You're on the clock.
Yes, good morning, Ms. Greene.
Good morning. How you doing?
I was prompted to call, and I like what you're doing, and your conversation, your monologue covered the whole scope of scenarios, right? That I really think are really bring a new consciousness. But the thing is, Erin, you and I had mentioned this. I spoke about this years ago about the lack of bathrooms, et cetera, and garbage, right? But the thing is, with the bathrooms or by the fish fry, et cetera, it really is a hidden message. I can't put it on Brave because he's in new, and I think he's an action man. So maybe he's listening, and somebody's listening, because this is really inglorious. It is inglorious, and so I want to make a quick comment on the stray dogs and the feral dogs, right? But some of them are not feral. But Erin, just about 2 weeks ago, I was cycling on my way home, and I was on Market Street, heading south, and I heard the screaming. And it was a young guy. The guy might have been about 10 to 12, well, not even 12 yet. But he maybe was about 4 feet, just over 4 feet. But he's kind of fat. And so I turned to the corner. And when I looked, there's about 4 or 5 dogs chasing him. But he's like trying to scare them off. And he's barking. He almost fell down. And the dogs were continually coming at him. And this is a populated area, houses. But these people have these dogs. And these dogs are out in the road coming at people. Even just all throughout the Grove area. People just allow their dogs to come out and bother with people. Sometimes you're cycling for miles, and you're tired, and you don't even have the energy to slow down, to start back up. It's not even the dangers of it. The fact that the government is no effort to curtail this type of scenario, because until something happens, and then it's a perpetual paradigm. There's nothing being done about it. You shouldn't have dogs running out in the streets at people, man. They really could do better in that area.
Yeah, man, absolutely. Nice thing, man. Yeah. Like you say, it's a balance. Obviously, I got a text that said, "Don't blame the dogs." Ain't nobody blaming the dogs. As soon as the government passes this law on marijuana, I'm gonna start training dogs. Please blame the human owners. It's a balance. It's the human owners, and it's the state that refuses to use the mechanisms available to it. The state, they're supposed to come through the communities and make sure that the communities are functioning in a safe way for everybody. These are functions that people are getting paid for. We got animal control now. Whether successive governments have drained these units and agencies and departments of their resources in an attempt to close them down is another story. Okay, caller, I got 30 seconds for you. Good morning, you're on the clock. Hi.
Yes, I wanted to speak on the garbage collection part.
Yes.
When I go to the States, I usually stay with family members in their homes.
Mm-hmm.
And I realized that the government has implemented 3 bins. One for plastic, one for cans, and the other one for garbage.
Mm-hmm.
Even if you have to charge us for the extra bin, do you think that's possible for us to have something like that here? Because we always talk about carbon credit and
oh yeah,
change
listen,
and
in
all this
fact,
other stuff.
In fact, if we don't see conversations like this issue that you're raising, if we don't see them, then we know that whether the government has the political will to engage carbon credits and issues on climate change, whether they have the will or not, they don't have the capacity to do it, because this is the foundation of those discussions.
Because if you notice, you have some people that have still have the metal bin.
Yeah.
Whereas they should all be now plastic. And like that, it was so convenient to dump my garbage because each one is marked, clearly marked.
Yeah.
So when the garbage truck comes around, they know what to collect and which truck to collect what.
Right, absolutely. I got to go to a break. I want you all to know we're going to have a conversation about Alicia Wallace from Equality Bahamas. But producer, I hear you playing that music. I want you to play another song from a man. Either play the one by Smokey 007 or George Simonet. It's still a Culture Thursday. All of these conversations are about culture and the way that we live together and grow together. So I hope you all enjoy this music while we go to a break on Guardian Radio 96.9 FM.
I am dancing with an angel, an angel, an angel. Just a little polka, a little polka. Oh, what a girl in my arms. Just a little polka, any other polka. But oh, what a girl in my arms tonight. Oh, what a girl in my arms. I am dancing with Bernita, with Bernita, Bernita, Bernita. I am dancing with Bernita, with Bernita, Bernita, Bernita. Just another
I used to think of the bank as my personal ATM machine. If I wanted a new car, new furniture, a weekend trip to Miami, no problem, just max up. I was a big baller until I realized that 75% of my salary was going to pay back all those loans. Fidelity's personal financial coaching was the best solution. Fidelity gave me a plan with a debt consolidation loan that has a built-in savings that pays 5% interest. I now only have one low monthly payment, plus money in my pocket. Give Fidelity Bank a call at 356-7764 in Nassau or 352-6676 in Freeport. Visit any of Fidelity's locations or visit a website at fidelitygroup.com.
The Water and Sewage Corporation advises its customers, residents, and the general public that the corporation will commence improvement work on Boyd Road between Nassau Street and Columbus Avenue, beginning on July 4th, 2022, for a duration of 8 weeks. During this period, there may be some interruption in water supply, road closures, and detours around the work area. Motorists are asked to avoid the area between the hours of 9 a.m. and 2 p.m. The corporation apologizes for any inconvenience which may be caused and appreciate your patience as they work to improve their level of service.
This is Guardian Radio 96.9 FM. Fresh news, smart talk, all day.
Out to me, you don't get no sweetness out of me. Out to me, you don't get no sweetness out of me. Go along, you brown skin gal, you don't get no sweetness out of me. Go along, you brown skin gal, you don't get no sweetness out of me. Out to me, you don't get no diamonds.
Good morning and welcome back to Guardian Radio 96.9 FM. You're on the clock with Erin, Greene, and in a moment we're going to bring in Alicia Wallace. We're going to be talking about marital rape and Equality Bahamas' Strike 5 campaign. Just before we go there, I just want to, 2 quick notes about the garbage. See, we were sort of stuck in a conversation just now about, there are not enough garbage bins and people are nasty and there's garbage everywhere. But guess what? When you go to developed countries, like when you have a big event, like you have a Junkanoo, you know what happens? They hire sanitation workers, right? There's a company. The people come in and they are working the event 24/7. They don't wait until all the garbage is on the ground and they are working the event. They're walking up and down, picking up garbage, changing out bags. It's a constant movement. Why? Because people are constantly generating trash. And then the next thing you do in a developed country, they have a machine that comes in and it sweeps the street. It'll wash it. It washes it and cleans it, removes the trash, all of that. All of that modern world thing. And if you're going to keep demanding these modern world salaries, you're going to need to provide us with some modern world thing. The second thing before we transition is this is very quickly. What happened to the median at the pedestrian crossing at UB on University Drive at the main campus? What happened to that? Did somebody do that with their car? It's just madness on the Bahamian roads. Anyway, I have got to move on. Good morning, Miss Alicia Wallace.
Good morning, Erin.
How are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I am good. Thank you. So I'm working on my retirement plan,
Okay.
and I realize that where I am right now, I'm going to need like one husband or maybe two husbands to make it work by the time I reach retirement. And so,
Are you sure you want that to be your plan?
well, I was certain about the plan. It was a foolproof plan until I realized that there is no such thing as marriage. Like apparently nobody in the law recognizes rape within the marriage, and it made me stop for a second.
Exactly.
But
Makes
I heard
marriage a little dangerous.
Yeah, I heard we're making movements on that. Possibly the government says that they're working on legislation, and I'm really interested in hearing them talk about the legislation and why why they've included the provisions they've included. But I haven't heard or seen anything yet. And so one of the things I want to ask you is, where are we so far? What is the status of the state discussion on marital rape and the suggestion or the indication that they are going to pass new legislation?
Well, as seems to be the norm these days, the state is being a little strange about the way that they go about this. Equality Bahamas has certainly been asking to see the bill in its current form, the draft,
Yeah.
for a few months now, and seen it. There's been some silence and then some redirecting. So hopefully within the next few days, we'll be able to actually have a look at that and see the components of that draft, because we know that the one that we saw in 2018 was not acceptable.
All right.
And we have, of course, developed the Strike 5 campaign, where we've laid out the components that we absolutely need to see in this new bill in order to criminalize marital rape in the most explicit way possible.
Okay, to criminalize it in the most explicit way possible. What does that mean?
So we want to see marital rape criminalized and recognized as rape and not called something else.
Right.
So
like the
what
way-
we saw in 2018 was the suggestion that we could just call it something different. And we've also heard that from various people in the press in recent months saying, call it something else. Well, that's not acceptable because it's rape.
Right.
Why would we call it something else?
What did they want to call it?
There were a number of other things, like aggravated spousal sexual assault by spouse is what's currently in the Sexual Offenses Act in Section 15, but that only applies if there's a separation or divorce.
Right.
So I think those were the two main other names that were being given that really sort of downplay the act of rape.
Right.
And still feed into that idea that it's not possible for a spouse to rape a spouse.
Now, when I think about that, I think about the transition in language from statutory rape to unlawful sexual intercourse.
Yes.
And with the commentary surrounding that, I want to call it a revelation, because a lot of people weren't really aware that when people were saying unlawful sexual assault, in many instances they meant statutory rape. Right?
And that's why language is important, and why we are calling on the law enforcement agencies, we're calling on the ministers, the Attorney General's office, everyone who's legislating, as well as the press, to use accurate language. Mm-hmm. And particularly when we're talking about violence, when we're talking about sexual violence, and when we're talking about children, right? Because a lot of the time we're talking about 14, 15-year-old girls and what's happening to them, and it's being called unlawful sex. It's not sex. There's a difference between sex and rape. Mm-hmm. And where there is no consent, and we know that if you're under 16, you cannot give consent. Where there's no consent, it is not sex, it's rape. So let's call it that.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so I got some questions. I just burn in, right? Do you think if people understood that the law was gender neutral, right, which means that the law recognizes that men can also be raped by their wives, do you think that people would be more comfortable with the bill and with changing the law and recognizing rape and marriage?
I don't think so. No.
Okay. Here's another question. Do you think I think that people believe that rape can occur within marriage. I think the largest opposition is the fear that bad women will use this law to take advantage of good men. Do you think that that is the bulk of the opposition, or is the bulk of the opposition still rooted in this belief that rape cannot occur within a marriage?
I think it's a combination, and both of these. One is more of a fundamental belief that's tied to religious fundamentalism, really,
Yeah.
and the other is a distraction, more of a distraction. So we have like this fundamental difference where some people think that this is just not possible. And some of us are saying it is absolutely possible. It doesn't matter what your relationship is to a person. It's still possible for them to violate you, for them to be violent against you in various ways, including rape. But the argument about people being vindictive and using the law against someone, that's not a valid argument when we're talking about protecting people's lives. We're talking about a law, like many other laws, that it has a particular intent. And people can twist things. All kinds of other laws can be used in these ways, but we have a law that protects against that. We saw that used this year, actually. Within the last few months, I've seen that there was a case of a woman who accused someone of rape, and then I guess she later said that it wasn't true, and she was charged for that. So there is a law for that. It's not like something like that would go unpunished.
Right. So I have been suggesting for years that is it possible to have have two pieces of legislation? We have a law that recognizes that rape occurs in marriage, and that we have a law that allows a spouse to charge, right, with aggressive sexual spousal assault. And so the woman who does not want to, or the man who does not want to charge their spouse with rape, has an alternative to go to. Do you think that's an acceptable compromise?
That the issue that people have is with the language necessarily, although that seems to be where we get caught up in with the drafts. That's what's happening. There's an issue with the language, but people on the ground don't seem to be saying, oh, I would like to press charges, but call it something else. They're either saying this is not a real thing and there should be no law at all.
Right.
Or this is not something that I would like to use. So I haven't really seen anyone, I haven't heard anyone talk about wanting to be able to press charges under a different name. And I think we would need to have some consultation to see if that would be useful to people. But I think we do need to expand the way that we look at justice. And Equality Bahamas saw this in 2020 when we did some consultation and we had some working sessions to look at what we need to do to address gender-based violence. And we were hearing from survivors about what they wanted. And the message was very clear that we need to expand our idea of justice, because for a lot of people, justice is not putting someone in prison.
Yeah.
It looks different, and it might include rehabilitation. It might include some sort of restitution, some repair.
Right. Okay, so I got a caller on the line I want to go to, but so let's make a note. When I'm done with the caller, let's talk about the Strike 5 campaign itself. Let's talk about that, and because it's a really cool campaign and it's sort of simple to understand. Let's go to the caller. Good morning, caller. You're on the clock.
Hey, good morning, Erin.
Hi. Good morning. How are you?
I am great, sis. And good morning to the lady and your guest.
Yes.
Erin, engage me for just a second. I had the same conversation with a prominent pastor in this country, and the question I asked him, and maybe you can answer, the lady can answer, is where does you draw the line when it comes to saying against a person's will? And let me give you an example. Okay, if I married and I come home to my wife And she tells me, she said, DeWitt, I feel bad. I have a headache.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. That's my wife. Okay. And I know my wife telling me, she, every time I touch her, she pushing me away. Is it fair, although I'm her husband, for me to take my wife, throw my wife in the bed, proceed to take off her clothes, and she telling me, honey, I ain't for this. And isn't that against her will?
Yeah.
Okay, so what's the difference of Tom walks down the road? He meets Jane walking down the road. Throw Jane in the bush, hypothetically.
Mm-hmm.
Proceed to take off Jane's clothes, and she's pushing him off. Isn't that against her will?
I think so.
Okay, so what's the big deal with this marital rape? It does not make any sense, because if I am married and that's my wife, and that's her body, yes, I'm entitled to her body, because as we get married, we become one. But if she says she's not into that, Miss Greene, you cannot define that in the court of law, nowhere in history. And guess what? Let me say this to you and to your guest.
Mm-hmm.
The pastor up to now could not define in a marriage if someone say no, or out of marriage if someone say no. In other words, against your will. Now, I don't care what lawyers y'all bring. I don't care what politicians y'all bring. I don't care counselors or whoever. You cannot define the word against someone's will. And if you can explain to me, if my wife say no, and out of marriage, the lady say no, tell me what's the difference. Help me to understand that.
I mean, I think what I'm gathering is you saying is that rape is rape.
That's right.
Yeah, rape
you
is rape.
You can't define that.
Yeah.
You cannot define that, Miss Greene. And you know what has hurt me? I can hang up right now.
Yeah.
You got some of these clergymen that I have the utmost respect for. Or you can't have marital rape. What you mean by you can't have marital rape? If your wife tell you no, no is no. Where do you take her to the altar for 5 years, 10 years, 1 day, 3 days? No is no.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Thank you, DeWitt. Thank you. I want to say to people, you got to stop referencing the movies. Not you, DeWitt. Your point was great. We got to stop referencing the movies to looking for sort of standards and norms about intimacy and sexual intercourse. I'm going to make a suggestion here. If you are married, right? Like if you are married, if you are not married, let's start off with the single people. If you are not married, right? And I think this is a compromise that I offer. If you are not married, then you have to wait for a yes, a clear, definitive yes. You have to wait for a yes. Why? Because to get a yes means that a question was asked, that there was communication. And so you get a yes. Now, if you're married, I expect that if you get a no, then you know. Let your partner know with certainty. You get a no. This is just a compromise. The truth is, you should always be waiting for yes. You should always wait for a yes. This is old people talk. Old people tell you don't even have sex. Have it. You're making baby and that's it. If you're not married, you wait for a yes. The compromise is if you are married and you hear a no, you respect it. You have to respect it. Okay, Alicia, what say you? Ms. Wallace? Oh, sorry.
Yes, I'm in agreement with the caller. There really should be no distinction.
Mm-hmm.
Rape is rape, and we actually have graphics and we have stickers that say marital rape is rape. It's the same thing. It should not have different treatment, and that's what we are calling for to see in the Sexual Offenses Act, in the amendments that come. And I think what the caller really was talking about too is consent, the right to consent and to withhold the yes, right? I think there's this idea too that if you hear no, then it's no, but if you don't hear no, then it's okay. No, you want a yes.
Absolutely.
And we have included in our demands that there be a statutory definition of consent.
Okay.
So a definition that is right there in the act that is specific to sexual violence. And there are some examples of that. There is a consent in Guyana's law, and there's one in the law in Canada in their criminal code.
Yeah.
That applies directly to sexual violence. And we have quoted that in some of our graphics. If people are interested in having a look, they're all available at tiny.cc/strike, the number 5 IVE. And that definition is quite good. It says consent means the voluntary, that's a key word, voluntary agreement of the complainant to engage in the sexual activity in question. No consent is obtained if the agreement is expressed by the words or conduct of a person other than the complainant. The complainant is unconscious, is incapable of consenting for any reason, or the accused induces the complainant to engage in the activity by abusing a position of trust, power, or authority. The complainant expresses by words or conduct a lack of agreement to engage in the activity. So it goes on to say what consent is not. So we're really clear, and that's really what we need to see in that law.
Absolutely, and not just in the space about sexual violence and sexual intimacy and interactions. We need to learn about consent across the board. Because when you look at other like microcosms, other sectors of life and society, you could see that we have no regard for consent, even if we even understand it. Okay, Alicia, man, these texts are on fire. Some are in agreement with the conversation, some disagree, some vehemently. I got a caller on the line. Good morning, caller, you're on the clock. Good. Okay, you're gone. Producer, let's go to the second call. Good morning, caller.
Hey, good morning. How you doing, Mr. Greene?
I'm good, thank you. How are you?
Good morning to you again. I'm doing fine.
Good.
Ms. Greene, I just want to say, being a man that's grown up in the Bahamas, brought up by predominantly women, strong women at that, and having daughters and a significant other, I don't really see, I know it has happened, but I don't see why, people would even resort to, like, women so beautiful and stuff. We want to treat them tender and make sure, regardless, you always get on people's nerves, but why would you go to the extent of rape somebody or force yourself on it? I don't think it's enjoyable.
It's about...
And I got one more thing to say about wrangling up and let you learn.
Absolutely.
Yesterday, and I know he meant well, the guy, Mr. Jeffrey's name, the F&M guy, and he was on pleading for some young ladies who was rounded up in that lockup that the police raided all those houses and lock up those people. Okay. But he called those ladies' name by name, and I don't think that's the public. I understand he meant well, but he should really consider before he put people's name out, it carries some kind of stigma of being associated or being robbed. Locked up like that. So I don't think he should put their full government name out like that.
Yeah.
So, you all have a good day.
Thank you. We in the media and influencers, we need to be very careful, practice spatial awareness, and how we share information and for what purpose. Is it really needed in this point for whatever the strategy is or what it is you're trying to do? All right. Oh boy, Alicia, tell us about the Strike 5 campaign quickly.
The Strike 5 campaign really lays out the way that we need to criminalize marital rape. And the first point is amending Section 3, which has the definition of rape. And that definition ends with who is not his spouse. That's the part where we get the issue because it excludes people who are married. So we want to see those 5 words taken out, who is not his spouse, hence the name Strike 5. We also want to see Section 15 repealed. Once we change that definition of rape, we won't need Section 15. That's the one assault by spouse where there is a separation or divorce.
Right.
We want, as I mentioned, to see that definition of consent included in the Sexual Offenses Act. We also want a clause of non-immunity on the basis of marriage to make it abundantly clear that marriage is not a defense. We also want to ensure that, unlike that bill in 2018, there is no temporal limitation. So none of this 2-year limit to report, because it takes quite a long time to be able to be in a safe space when you're leaving an abusive relationship and to be able to report. And we don't want to see any requirement of the consent of the Attorney General to be able to press charges.
I got you. Absolutely. And we can find more information about the campaign at tiny.cc/strike number 5 IVE.
Yes, and you can also find information on our social media pages. We're Equality242 everywhere. So Facebook.com/Equality242, Twitter.com/Equality242. On Instagram, search Equality242 as well. We have the information there. We also have the link to that Google document where you'll find a breakdown of all of these elements that we're talking about and why they're important, as well as graphics that you can share online. And we do encourage people to share those graphics to let people in your networks know that you believe that marital rape is rape and that we do need to criminalize it in an explicit way.
Absolutely. I've got, oh, wow. These texts, man, texter, oh, gosh. You both need to find the companion God desires life's LIFE', before you obligate for this bill. Dear texter, I'm sorry that this conversation upset you so much, but it's going to be okay. Another text. Morning, Miss Greene. I need to know, has your guest ever been married or ever experienced rape in a marriage? I need the women who went through that to come on and speak. People would believe it more better. So you're saying only women who have been raped in a marriage should speak. I mean, not should speak, but they may be more effective advocates for marital rape legislation.
There's a stigma that comes with being a survivor of rape, being a survivor of various other acts of sexual violence and gender-based violence. It's quite difficult to talk about. It can be re-traumatizing. It takes quite a bit to be able to talk about it, even in therapy. And I think that we need to move away from this idea that people have to share their personal stories. They have to cut themselves, leave what they have experienced, or that people have to become victims before we care about an issue. Yeah. Even if no one has ever experienced marital rape, should we not provide that protection for people, for women in particular, because we know that women disproportionately experience these forms of violence? It's really ridiculous to call for people to come forward to share their stories. If people are willing to do that, then great. But the onus is not on them, and that's the reason that I'm an advocate.
All right.
Because I don't have to experience something to care about other human beings.
Why, thank you. Another text says, statutory rape is not real rape, so wording matters. Also sounds like you were saying it matters when it hurts women, but not when it can be used against men with false charges. Most female false charges are not punished, and what happens when it is not revealed to be false? You locked up an innocent man. Can't support this. Listen, you know that the term statutory rape refers to people who can speak but can't consent. So like a 9-year-old may say yes, like legitimately think that she is a big woman and saying yes, but there is no real consent that she could give. At 9, at 10, at 12, they can't give real consent. It is rape, texter. It is.
And coercion.
Yes.
People abuse their positions of power to coerce young people into engaging in activities that they are not able to consent to. The law says they can't consent for a reason.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. We're all out of time. I'd like to thank my producer for playing that music, because I have 17,000 ideas and words running through my mind right now, and I want to say all of them at once. But most importantly, thank you for joining the conversation, Ms. Wallace.
Thank you, Erin, for having me.
Somebody says, if not forced, it's not rape. Ah, boy, we have so much talking to do. We have so much talking and sharing to do. We know nothing about consent.
Sex and rape.
Yeah. Oh my. Also, anyway, dear Bahamas, I'm so excited. I gotta go though. Mr. Nuri is up next with Guardian Radio AM. Thank you, Miss Wallace. Thank you to the texters. Thank you to the callers. Thank you for sharing. Even if we don't agree, we're not gonna beat each other up. You know? Because we all Bahamians. We all have a right to live a life free of violence. Have a great.
Music, talent radio.